My name is Carol, I'm 58 years old, and my son uninvited me from his wedding with a text message while I was ironing his shirt for the rehearsal dinner. Before I tell you how his picture-perfect day completely collapsed because of it, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. For the last 30 years, my whole world has revolved around my 2 children. As a retired nurse here in Austin, Texas, I thought I'd finally reached that golden time of life. The hard years were behind me. The double shifts at the hospital to pay for tuition were a distant memory, and my son Michael was a doctor. A doctor. I can't even tell you the pride that filled my chest every time I said those words. He was my everything, and he was getting married. The house was quiet that afternoon, filled only with the gentle hiss of the steam iron and the scent of clean linen. I was working on the last few creases of Michael's silk shirt, a ridiculously expensive thing he'd bought for his rehearsal dinner. I smiled, picturing how handsome he'd look standing beside his bride-to-be, Tiffany. I felt a little hum of happiness in my chest. This was it. This was the moment all the sacrifice was for. My phone buzzed on the corner of the ironing board. I glanced at the screen. A message from Michael. I smiled, expecting a last-minute question about the arrangements. My smile froze, melting off my face as I read the words. "You're not invited to the wedding. Please don't make this harder." I stared at the screen. The words didn't make sense. It was like reading a foreign language. My hand holding the hot iron just hovered in midair. The steam curled up toward my face, hot and wet, like a sudden wave of tears. This had to be a mistake. A stupid, cruel joke. My fingers fumbled as I put the iron down in its cradle and snatched up the phone. I called him. My heart pounded in my ears, each ring a hammer blow. It went to voicemail. I called again, a knot of pure ice forming in my stomach. Straight to voicemail. He was rejecting my calls. A few seconds later, the screen lit up with another text. "It's Tiffany's day. We've decided this is for the best." That one word hit me like a physical blow. A punch to the gut that knocked all the air out of my lungs. It wasn't just him. It was them. My hands started to tremble, a violent, uncontrollable shaking. I had to set the phone down on the ironing board before I dropped it. The room felt like it was tilting, the floor shifting beneath my feet. I stumbled back and sank onto the edge of the sofa. The crisp shirt I'd been pressing forgotten. The silence in the house was suddenly deafening. No television, no kettle whistling, just the faint, mocking tick-tock of the kitchen clock marking the exact moment my life had been split in two. The moment my son, my beautiful boy who I'd held and rocked and bled for, had told me I didn't belong at the most important day of his life. I thought of everything I'd done. The venue in the Texas Hill Country that I'd found and secured with a personal friend. The florist I'd negotiated with for a better price. The deposit I'd paid for the band because they were a little short that month. Tiffany had called me her wedding angel just a few weeks ago, hugging me so tightly I could barely breathe. Was this what angels got? Cast out without a word of explanation? My blood ran cold, then hot with a slow simmering rage that started deep in my belly. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something sharp and hard. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't cry and plead. I had poured my entire life into that boy, my money, my time, my youth. I had sold my late husband's wedding ring to help with Michael's down payment on his first condo, a secret I had planned to take to my grave. The divorce had been hard, but raising my kids was my purpose. I picked up the phone again, my hands still shaking but with a different energy now. Not with shock but with a terrible newfound clarity. My thumb hovered over the screen, 1,000 angry, heartbroken replies swirling in my head. I took a shaky breath, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. I typed out one single word. Why? That was the word I typed. My thumb hovered over the send button, trembling. Why? It was such a small word for such a huge, gaping wound in the middle of my life. But what answer could possibly be good enough? What explanation could ever stitch this back together? I pictured him on the other end, showing the phone to Tiffany, the two of them rolling their eyes at his needy, dramatic mother. The thought was like swallowing acid. I deleted the word. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of my begging. I wouldn't be the hysterical woman they could point to and say, "See? This is why we couldn't have her there." I had more pride than that. At least I thought I did. I sank onto the sofa, the plush cushions offering no comfort. The house was so quiet. It was the same quiet I'd lived in for years, ever since the kids moved out, but this was different. This was a heavy, suffocating silence. It pressed in on me, filled my lungs, and made it hard to breathe. In that silence, the memories started to come, unbidden, like ghosts rising from the floorboards, each one a testament to a life lived for someone else. I remembered Michael in second grade. His face flushed with a dangerous fever from a nasty bout of strep throat. I had a major nursing conference in San Antonio that weekend. It wasn't a vacation, it was a stepping stone. A chance for a head nurse promotion. I desperately needed to build a better college fund for the kids, to make sure they had more than I ever did. I'd already paid for the drab hotel room and the conference fee myself. My presentation was printed and ready. But Michael's little hand was so hot in mine, and his voice was a weak, scratchy whisper when he said, "Don't go, Mommy. Please." I didn't go. I called my supervisor, my voice hollow as I explained, feeling the opportunity slip through my fingers like sand. The promotion went to someone else. I spent the next 3 days holding a cool cloth to his forehead, spooning soup into his mouth, and never, not for 1 second, did I regret it. I remembered when he wanted to join the travel soccer team in middle school. The fees were astronomical, a sum that might as well have been $1 million on my single salary. So I picked up extra weekend shifts at a private clinic across town. For 2 solid years, I didn't have a day off. I worked 7 days a week. I'd come home late on a Sunday night, my feet aching so badly it felt like I was walking on glass, and I'd see his muddy cleats by the back door and the cheap plastic trophy on his dresser, and the exhaustion would melt away. It was all worth it, I told myself. To see him happy, to see him succeed. Then came college, and after that the bombshell med school. The costs were crippling. A mountain of debt I couldn't bear for him to start his life with. My life became a blur of scrubs, sterile hallways, and the smell of antiseptic. I worked double shifts, sometimes sleeping for a few hours in my cramped sedan in the hospital parking lot between them. A cold cup of coffee my only companion. I sold that car, the one I'd had since my bitter divorce from Richard, so Michael could have reliable transportation to his classes and clinicals. The custody battle had been brutal, but I'd have fought a lion for my kids. I started taking the bus, standing at the stop in the pouring rain, shivering in the biting winter wind, telling myself it was a small price to pay. I was investing in my son's dream. I remembered his graduation day from medical school with painful clarity. I stood at the very back of the massive crowd, a tiny, anonymous figure in a sea of proud, celebrating families. When they called his name, Dr. Michael Peterson, a sob caught in my throat, so powerful it physically hurt. The woman next to me, a complete stranger, silently handed me a tissue. He was so handsome in that deep blue robe, so full of promise. He never saw me crying. He was too busy being lifted onto his friend's shoulders, his face beaming, his whole future stretched out before him like a golden road. And I didn't mind. I wanted to be the foundation he stood on, solid and invisible. But the biggest secret, the heaviest one, was the one that left a pale, empty space on my left hand. When he wanted to buy his first condo, the down payment was just out of reach. He was so frustrated, so close to giving up on his dream of homeownership. I couldn't let that happen. The next day, I took the diamond engagement ring my late husband, his father, had given me, and I walked into a pawn shop. The memory is seared into my brain. The dusty glass counter, the indifferent clerk, the sickening feeling of it sliding off my finger for the last time. A part of my past, my love story, gone for a few $1,000s. I told Michael the bank had approved a special first-time buyer program. He believed me. He was so proud of himself. I never told him the truth. I didn't want to tarnish his victory with the weight of my sacrifice. And now this. All those years, all those little pieces of myself I had chipped away and given to him, they all led to this. A cold 2-sentence text message. A dismissal. I had given him everything. But as I sat there in the crushing silence, I was about to find out that they still expected one more thing from me. My silent, unconditional surrender. The memories kept coming, and with them the polished, smiling image of Tiffany. When Michael first brought her home for Sunday dinner, I was so incredibly hopeful. She was beautiful, poised, with a smile that could light up a room and a handshake that was firm and confident. "You're going to love her, Mom," he'd said, his eyes shining, and I wanted to. Lord, how I wanted to. After the painful divorce from Michael's father, and then losing my second husband so suddenly to a heart attack, My family was all I had left. I had always dreamed of having a daughter or friend. Tiffany seemed to fit the part perfectly at first. She was a master of the charm offensive. She didn't call me Mrs. Peterson. It was Carol from the very first minute. She brought a ridiculously expensive bouquet of orchids to dinner. She'd sit in the kitchen with me while I cooked, asking thoughtful questions about my nursing career. Her big, hazel eyes wide with what I mistook for genuine admiration. "You're such an inspiration, Carol," she'd say, her voice like warm honey. "I can see where Michael gets his strength and compassion." It was intoxicating. After years of feeling like just a tired, overworked single mom, she made me feel seen. When they got engaged, I was over the moon. The wedding planning started immediately, a whirlwind of venues and caterers, and I jumped in with both feet, eager to help. "Oh, Carol, you're a lifesaver," Tiffany would exclaim when I found a loophole in a venue contract, or got a deep discount from a caterer I knew from a hospital fundraiser. I was the one who secured the idyllic venue in the Texas Hill Country, a place that usually had a 2-year waiting list. I called the owner, a man whose wife I had nursed through a difficult double mastectomy years ago. He opened up a date for me, for an old friend, he said. I spent weeks vetting florists, tasting cakes, listening to demo tapes from bands. I was in my element, using my life's experience and connections to build their perfect day. Tiffany started calling me her wedding angel. It made me feel needed, important, woven into the very fabric of their new life together. But then the little things started to happen. Tiny cracks in the perfect, polished facade. They were so small at first you could almost convince yourself you'd imagined them. A condescending comment disguised as a compliment. A decision made without consulting me, after I'd already done hours of research. The real turning point came about a month ago. I'd found the perfect mother-of-the-groom dress. I never splurged on myself, but this was different. It was a beautiful, elegant sheath dress in a soft shade of sage green. It was modest, tasteful, but when I tried it on in the department store, I saw a woman in the mirror I hadn't seen in years. I felt pretty, confident. For the first time in a very long time. Giddy with excitement, I snapped a quick picture in the dressing room and sent it to Tiffany. Her reply came almost instantly. "OMG, Carol, that's gorgeous," followed by a string of heart emojis. I smiled, relieved. A few minutes later my phone rang. It was her. "I just saw the picture," she gushed, her voice bubbling with energy. "It's absolutely stunning on you. You look amazing." "Oh, thank you, honey. I'm so glad you approve," I said, my heart swelling. There was a slight pause, just a beat of silence. "I just have one tiny thought," she said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial girl talk whisper. It's a very eye-catching color. You know? It photographs very brightly. As the mother of the groom, you really want something a little more understated. You wouldn't want to accidentally pull focus from the bride on her big day, would you?" The words were wrapped in silk, but they landed like tiny shards of glass. Pull focus? I was a 58-year-old widow who spent most of her days in sweatpants and orthopedic shoes. She was a radiant 28-year-old bride. The idea was so absurd it was insulting. It was a calculated move designed to put me back in my box. "Oh," I said, my voice suddenly small. The joy I'd felt moments before evaporated, leaving a cold, hollow feeling in its place. I didn't think of that." "Don't even worry about it," she chirped, her bright, dismissive tone returning as if she'd just solved a major crisis. "It's a common mistake. I just wanted to give you a heads up. We can go shopping together next week and find something perfect and neutral. Maybe a nice beige or a soft gray." I murmured a non-committal agreement and hung up the phone. I stood in front of my closet mirror later that night, looking at the beautiful green dress hanging there in its garment bag. It wasn't about the color. It wasn't about the dress at all. It was a warning shot. A gentle, smiling reminder of my place in the New World Order. I was a supporting character. My role was to be muted, to blend into the background, to be helpful but ultimately invisible. And that little comment, that sweet, poisonous suggestion, was the first clear sign that my assigned place was getting smaller and smaller every day. I just hadn't realized yet that soon, that place wouldn't even be in the same state. The days after the text message were a blur of numb disbelief. I didn't leave the house. I couldn't. The thought of facing a neighbor, of having to conjure a smile and make small talk was unbearable. I just moved from room to room like a ghost in my own home, the pristine white wedding binder sitting on the coffee table like a shrine to my own stupidity. My phone was silent. Michael didn't call. Tiffany didn't call. It was as if I had simply ceased to exist, deleted from their lives as easily as a spam email. Then, on the third day, a Wednesday afternoon, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was from my hometown back in Ohio. I hesitated, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach, then answered. It was Susan, the sister of my ex-husband, Richard. A woman whose life consisted of gossip and passing judgment, and someone I hadn't spoken to in at least 5 years. Carol? It's Susan. Her voice was tight, laced with a syrupy, insincere concern that set my teeth on edge. Listen, I'm just calling because, well, Richard mentioned something, and I just wanted to hear your side of it before it gets all over the family. My side of what, Susan? I asked, my voice flat and lifeless. There was a dramatic sigh on the other end, the kind people use when they're about to deliver bad news they're secretly enjoying. He said that you were refusing to help out with the wedding costs. He said Michael and Tiffany were under a lot of financial pressure, and you wouldn't give them a dime. He even said you were being difficult about the inheritance money from your mother. The blood drained from my face. I felt dizzy, like the room was tilting again. My mother's inheritance? I had used every last cent of that small inheritance, the money she'd scraped together from a lifetime of cleaning other people's houses, to pay for the final 2 years of Michael's undergraduate tuition so he could graduate without a mountain of debt. He knew that. He had thanked me with tears in his eyes. They both knew that. They were lying. This was a calculated smear campaign. They weren't just excluding me. They were actively painting me as the villain to the entire family. A greedy, selfish mother who was hoarding money and withholding it from her deserving son. It was character assassination, swift and brutal. Susan, that is an absolute lie, I said, my voice shaking with a rage so profound it almost choked me. I paid for his education with that money. Well, that's just what's going around, she said coolly, her tone making it clear she didn't believe a word I was saying. You know, Michael is a doctor now, he has a certain status to maintain. A wedding like this costs a fortune. I just hope you'll reconsider your position. It's his big day after all. I hung up without another word. I couldn't speak. I was being slandered by my own son. He was poisoning the well, making sure that if I did try to speak up, no one would believe me. He was salting the earth of my reputation so that nothing good could ever grow there again. My hands were trembling as I dialed my daughter's number. Sarah. My sweet, gentle Sarah. She was the peacemaker, the one who hated conflict. She would understand. She had to. Mom, she answered, her voice hesitant, cautious, like she'd been expecting my call and dreading it. Sarah, you won't believe what they're saying. I started, the words tumbling out of me in a frantic rush. They're telling the whole family that I won't help pay for the wedding, that I'm keeping inheritance money from them. Sarah, it's all lies. Mom, slow down, she interrupted, but there was no warmth in her voice. There was just weariness. A deep, profound exhaustion, as if my pain was an inconvenience to her. I know. I talked to Michael. And? You know it's not true. You were there when I wrote the check to the university. There was a long, heavy sigh that felt like a physical weight on my chest. Mom, can we just not do this? Tiffany is under an incredible amount of stress. Planning a wedding of this size is a huge deal. Things get said, people get emotional. Maybe you should just give them some space right now. Let them have their moment. Their moment. My voice cracked. Sarah, he uninvited me. Your mother. From his wedding. He cast me aside and now he's lying about me to everyone we know. I know, Mom, and it's not right, she said, but her words were weak, flimsy, like a paper shield against a hurricane. But getting into a huge fight about it isn't going to help anyone. Just be the bigger person. For the sake of the family's peace. For the sake of peace. The words echoed in my head, mocking me. I was always the one expected to keep the peace. The one who was supposed to absorb the blows, swallow the insults and smile through the pain. All so that nobody else had to feel uncomfortable. The betrayal from my daughter, my quiet, steady Sarah, cut me deeper than anything Michael had done. After the custody battle, I had fought to keep them together, to make sure they always had each other. And now she was choosing them. She was choosing the path of least resistance. Hanging up the phone with my daughter felt like the final door slamming shut in a long dark hallway. I was truly utterly alone in this, or so I thought. But as it turned out, when it comes to my family, there was always a lower floor to sink to, a deeper level of hell to discover. And the next phone call was my express elevator going straight down. I didn't think it was possible to feel worse, to feel more abandoned, but I was wrong. The next afternoon, as I was staring blankly at the television, not even registering what was on, my phone rang again. The caller ID flashed a name I hadn't seen in over a year. A name that made a pit of acid form in my stomach. Richard. My ex-husband. The father of my children. A man whose primary contribution to their lives since our acrimonious divorce had been a birthday card with a $20 bill inside, if he remembered. A cold dread filled me, but I answered. I had to know what this new fresh hell was. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. I couldn't look away. Carol, he said, his voice offensively cheerful, a booming false bonhomie that always grated on my nerves. Long time no talk. Hope Austin's treating you well. I didn't answer. I just waited. Richard never called for a chat. He never called to see how I was. He only ever called when he wanted something. So, he said, cutting to the chase with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I'm heading up a little project for the kids. A massive surprise wedding gift. We're all pooling our money to give them a big chunk for a down payment on a house. Something to really get them started off right in a nice neighborhood. I'm putting you down for your share, of course. I was speechless. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it was breathtaking. He made it sound like he was the benevolent patriarch, the hero organizing this grand gesture. It's $3,000 a person, he continued, completely oblivious to my stunned silence. He named a few of his relatives who were contributing, as if to add peer pressure to the insult. Just Venmo it to me whenever you get a chance. I'm handling all the logistics. It'll be a great surprise, huh? From the whole family. My jaw clenched so hard I felt a sharp pain shoot up to my temple. Family. That word again. A tool they used to pry open my wallet and my heart whenever it was convenient for them. A weapon they used to guilt me into submission. I finally found my voice. It was quiet, but it was as cold and hard as a block of ice. Richard, I'm not invited to the wedding. He paused, but only for a fraction of a second. Then he scoffed. A dismissive, arrogant sound that made my skin crawl with old resentments. Oh, come on, Carol. Don't be petty. This isn't about that. This is for the kids. Our son. Are you really going to let a little squabble get in the way of their happiness and financial future? A little squabble. He called being systematically excommunicated from my son's life, being slandered and abandoned, a little squabble. A hot flash of pure, undiluted rage washed over me. It was so intense I felt dizzy. This was their masterstroke. They had uninvited me, dragged my name through the mud with the family, turned my own daughter against me, and now they were sending in the final insult, the debt collector, my worthless ex-husband, to demand $3,000 for a party I was forbidden to attend. It was a perfectly orchestrated campaign of humiliation. I won't be contributing, I said, my voice dangerously even, each word clipped and precise. He chuckled, a nasty, condescending little sound. You sure you want to play it like that, Carol? You'll look pretty bad to everyone. The bitter ex-wife, the selfish mother who can't even put her own feelings aside for her son's wedding. It's a bad look. But he was talking to a dead line. I had already ended the call. No goodbye, no explanation. Just a final decisive click that severed the last rotten thread connecting me to that man. I threw the phone onto the sofa, and it bounced onto a cushion. I stood in the middle of my living room, my body trembling, not from sadness or shock anymore, but from a fury so profound it felt like it could burn the house down from the inside out. They had pushed me and pushed me, expecting me to bend, to break, to absorb it all like I always had. They thought I was a doormat, a bank machine. A silent, convenient fixture in their lives who would pay for the privilege of being ignored. As the silence of the room settled around me again, my gaze landed on the thick white wedding binder on my coffee table, the one filled with all my notes, my contacts, my carefully laid plans. They had made a terrible, terrible mistake. They thought they had taken everything from me. They thought I had nothing left. But in that moment, as the rage cleared my head like a lightning strike. I realized they had no idea who really held all the power. They had no idea what was inside that binder. And you are not going to believe what I found. With a strange, almost supernatural calm settling over my fury, I walked over to the coffee table. My movements were slow, deliberate, like a woman in a trance. I picked up the wedding binder. It felt heavy in my hands, heavy with the weight of hundreds of hours of my life, hundreds of phone calls, dozens of meetings. I had poured myself into this project, into their dream. Now it felt like a monument to my own foolishness, a pristine white tombstone for my motherly love. I sat down in my armchair and placed the binder in my lap. I took a deep breath and opened it. The familiar scent of fresh paper and ink rose up to meet me. Inside, everything was perfectly organized, just as I'd left it a week ago in another lifetime. Tab after tab, labeled in my neat, practical handwriting. Venue. Florist. Caterer. Band. Linens. Photography. Each section was filled with glossy brochures, signed contracts, payment schedules, and confirmation emails. It was the blueprint for a perfect day. A day I was no longer a part of. I started flipping through the pages, not really looking for anything at first. Just tracing the lines of my own work. A masochistic little ritual. I opened the venue tab. The first page was the contract for the Whispering Oaks. That beautiful sought-after place in the hill country with the sprawling ancient trees and the rustic chic barn that Tiffany had fallen in love with from a magazine. It was a 5-page document, dense with legal jargon. I skimmed it, my eyes glazing over the clauses about liability and force majeure. Then I got to the last page. The signature page. And that's when I saw it. My world stopped. My breath caught in my throat. I leaned closer, my eyes scanning the bottom of the page as if I couldn't trust them. There, on the line marked client signature, was my name, written in my own familiar, slightly slanted cursive, Carol Peterson. Below it, on the line for the second client or cosigner, it was starkly, beautifully blank. Not Michael's name. Not Tiffany's. Just mine. My heart started to beat faster. A frantic, hopeful rhythm against my ribs. It had to be a fluke. I quickly flipped to the next section. Florist. A 3-page contract for $20,000 worth of peonies, hydrangeas, and trailing eucalyptus. I went straight to the last page. There it was again. Signature. Carol Peterson. The space next to it was empty. My hands were shaking now, but not with grief or rage. It was with a wild, surging, electrifying hope. I tore through the binder, a manic energy taking over me. The caterer, a $30,000 invoice for a 4-course meal for 200 people. My signature. The sought-after 10-piece band, $10,000. My signature. The linen rentals, the string quartet for the ceremony. The vintage Bentley for their getaway. My name. My signature. Again and again and again. It all came flooding back to me in a rush. Of course, it had all been done in my name. It hadn't even been a conscious decision, just a practical one. I was the one with the perfect credit score built over 30 years of disciplined, responsible living. I was the one who had spent a lifetime building relationships in the Austin community. When I called the venue manager, a man whose wife I had nursed through a difficult surgery, he gave me a prime October date that wasn't officially available. When I talked to the caterer, she gave me a 15% friends and family discount without me even asking. My name, my reputation, my connections, that's what had made this dream wedding possible. I remember telling Michael and Tiffany so casually, "Oh, it's just easier if I handle the paperwork. Don't you two worry about a thing." I had meant it as a gift. I was trying to take the stress off their shoulders. I never, in a million years, imagined it would become a weapon. My weapon. My mind was racing, firing on all cylinders for the first time in weeks. What did this mean? I was the contracted client. I was the one legally responsible for the final payments. But did that also mean I was the one in control? I was the one who could pull the plug. I scrambled for my phone, my fingers flying as I looked up the number for my oldest friend, Brenda. Brenda wasn't just a friend. She was a lawyer. A sharp, no-nonsense divorce lawyer who had seen the worst of human nature and had zero patience for fools. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. "Brenda Stone." "Brenda," I said, my voice a half-whisper, half-shout. "It's Carol. I need you to look at something." Wedding contracts. Oh Lord, Carol, don't tell me you're getting married again, she asked with a dry laugh. Did you learn nothing from Richard? No, I said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face for the first time in what felt like an eternity. It's for my son. And I think I might be about to file for divorce from his wedding. Brenda listened patiently on the other end of the line as I explained everything, my voice getting stronger and clearer with every word. From the initial text message to the lies about the inheritance, to Richard's demand for money, and finally to the signatures. After I finished, there was a long, satisfying pause on her end. Then she let out a low whistle that crackled over the phone. Well, I'll be damned, Carol, she said, and I could hear the predatory grin in her voice. They didn't just uninvite a guest. They fired their primary investor, and the sole proprietor of the entire event. And they are far too stupid and arrogant to even realize it. An hour later, I was sitting in Brenda's sleek, downtown office, the white wedding binder lying open on her expansive mahogany desk between us. The air in her office smelled of expensive leather, strong coffee, and victory. Brenda, with her sharp tortoiseshell reading glasses perched on her nose, examined each contract with the focused intensity of a surgeon dissecting a patient. She hummed to herself a low, pleased sound as she tapped a perfectly manicured nail on the pages, her red lipstick a slash of defiance in the quiet room. This is beautiful, Carol. Truly, she said, looking up at me over her glasses, her eyes glittering. It's a fortress. It's legally airtight. She slid the 5-page venue contract toward me and pointed to a paragraph in the dense fine print. Section 7B. Read this line out loud, she said. I leaned forward, my finger tracing the words as I read. Final payment of the outstanding balance is due in full no later than 7 calendar days prior to the event date. Failure to remit payment by the established deadline will result in the immediate voiding of this agreement. All previously paid deposits and retainers will be refunded in full to the signatory of the contract within 10 business days. I read it again, silently this time, letting the words sink in. Refunded in full. To the signatory. To me. Not to them. To me. They're all like this, more or less, Brenda said, leaning back in her tall leather chair with a satisfied creak. Standard vendor contracts. They protect the vendor, but they also protect the client. And in this case, Carol, you are the only client. You are the only person legally bound to these agreements. And therefore, you are the only one with the power to see them through, or to terminate them. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. The power of it, the sheer beautiful simplicity of it was overwhelming. It was a clean, legal, and utterly devastating solution. It wasn't about screaming or crying or pleading. It was about a signature on a piece of paper. Brenda's expression softened. She saw the turmoil in my eyes. She reached across the vast desk and put her hand on mine. Her skin was cool and her grip was firm. This isn't about revenge, Carol, she said, her voice dropping, becoming firm but kind. Don't you let them or anyone else twist this into you being vindictive or bitter. This is a business decision. This is about protecting your assets, your labor, and your dignity. You poured your time, your money, your heart, and your good name into this. They decided that none of that had any value. They didn't just uninvite you. They tried to erase you, to slander you, to humiliate you. You have absolutely no obligation, legal or moral, to fund your own erasure. Her words were like a steel rod being inserted into my spine. She was right. This wasn't me being petty. This was a business transaction that had gone sour. They had breached the unspoken contract of family, of love, of basic human decency. Now, I was simply enforcing the written ones. I was no longer their mother in this equation. I was Clarimone Events, a business entity they had chosen to fire. That night, I sat at my small desk, the one tucked into a corner of my bedroom. I didn't turn on any music. I didn't pour a glass of wine. I wanted to do this with a clear head and a steady hand. The only light in the room was the cool blue-white glow of the laptop screen, illuminating my face. I opened a new email. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing with a speed and confidence I hadn't felt in years. To Harrison Reed, Events Manager, The Whispering Oaks. Subject: Cancellation Notice Event #774B Peterson/Morgan Wedding. Dear Mr. Reed, This email serves as official written notice of cancellation for the Peterson/Morgan event scheduled for Saturday, October 25th. As per our signed agreement, and specifically referencing Section 7B, the final payment will not be made. Please consider the contract void as of the payment deadline. Kindly process the full refund of the initial deposit to the business account on file at your earliest convenience. Thank you for your professionalism. Sincerely, Carol Peterson, contract signatory. It was perfect. Cold, professional, and utterly unassailable. No emotion. Just business. I copied and pasted the text, meticulously changing the names, contract numbers, and relevant details for the other 3 main vendors: the florist, the caterer, and the 10-piece band. For emails lined up like soldiers in my drafts folder. As a final touch, advised by Brenda, I attached a scanned PDF of each respective contract, with the relevant cancellation clause highlighted in a bright, unmissable yellow. There would be no room for confusion, no grounds for argument, no frantic phone calls trying to find a loophole. When I was done, I leaned back in my chair and looked at the 4 drafts on the screen. It was just a handful of words, but together they were a declaration of independence. My hands weren't shaking. My eyes weren't crying. I felt a profound sense of calm, like the quiet, powerful eye of a hurricane. Then, with 4 precise, deliberate clicks of the mouse, I scheduled each email to be sent at exactly 9 a.m. the following Monday. 7 days before the wedding. The countdown had officially begun. After scheduling the emails, I closed the laptop with a soft final click. The decision was made. The mechanism was in motion. There was nothing left to do but wait for the gears to turn. But I wasn't going to wait in that silent house, staring at the phone, jumping at every shadow like a frightened rabbit. I refused to be a prisoner in my own home, cowering as I waited for the fallout from a bomb I myself had set. I pushed the laptop aside, a sense of profound lightness filling my chest. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I opened a new browser window and my fingers, moving with a will of their own, typed 2 words into the search bar: Key West. I'd always wanted to go. My late husband David and I had talked about it for years. We had a postcard of Mallory Square tacked to a corkboard in the kitchen. It was our one-day trip. But life, as it always does, got in the way. There was always a mortgage payment, a braces bill, a car repair. The kids' needs always came first. One day had become someday, and after David's heart attack, someday had become never. Not anymore. I found a non-stop flight from Austin leaving Friday morning. I looked at the price, a sum that would have made me hyperventilate a month ago. Now I just smiled. The venue deposit refund alone would cover it 10 times over. I clicked confirm and entered my credit card information without a second thought. I booked a one-way ticket. I didn't know when I'd be coming back. For the first time in my adult life, it didn't matter. The rest of the week was a strange, surreal dream. I moved through my days with a quiet purpose. I went to the grocery store. I paid my bills. I watered my plants. On the surface, everything was normal, but underneath, a revolution was taking place. I was disentangling my life, my identity, from theirs. I packed slowly, mindfully. It wasn't a frantic, last-minute packing job. It was a ritual. I folded a few light linen dresses, a pair of comfortable walking sandals, a swimsuit. I packed 2 books I'd bought months ago but had never found the time to read, their spines still stiff and new. As I rolled a t-shirt tightly, a bittersweet memory surfaced. Me teaching a 10-year-old Michael how to pack for our first mother-son trip to Chicago, showing him how to roll his clothes to save space. A ghost of a smile touched my lips, the memory warm and sweet. But then it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by the cold reality of the man he had become. That boy was gone. I was mourning him as surely as I had mourned his father. Friday morning, I walked out of my house with a single small carry-on bag and locked the front door behind me. The click of the deadbolt felt different this time. It wasn't just locking the house. It was locking a chapter of my life. I wasn't just leaving for a trip. I was escaping. I was staging a jailbreak from the prison of expectation I had lived in for 30 years. Monday morning found me sitting in a small sun-drenched cafe on Duval Street. The air was thick and sweet with the scent of salt and blooming hibiscus. I had a half-eaten slice of key lime pie in front of me and a cup of rich, dark coffee. At exactly 8 a.m. Key West time, which was 9 a.m. back in Austin, I felt a phantom buzz in my pocket, even though my phone was turned off and buried at the bottom of my purse. I closed my eyes and pictured it. I imagined the emails leaving my outbox, for silent digital arrows hitting their targets in 4 different inboxes across Austin. No thunderclap. No dramatic music. Just a soft electronic whoosh that would unravel a meticulously planned $100,000 event. I paid my bill, left a generous tip for the friendly waitress, and walked towards the ocean. I spent the day wandering, exploring the little side streets with their pastel-colored houses and roaming chickens. I kept my phone off. I didn't want to know. Not yet. I owed myself this peace, this quiet, this deliberate, blissful ignorance. That night I stood on the crowded pier at Mallory Square, the very place from the postcard that had been on my kitchen corkboard for 2 decades. I stood amidst a crowd of strangers and watched the sunset. The sky exploded into a riot of impossible color. Fiery orange, soft pink, deep purple. Street performers juggled torches, a musician played a soulful tune on a steel drum, and the whole crowd applauded together as the last brilliant sliver of sun dipped below the horizon. I felt a single tear slide down my cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release, a cleansing, a baptism in the warm, salty air. As the Texas landscape had shrunk below me on the plain, I hadn't felt like a villain. I hadn't even felt triumphant. I just felt still. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't a mother, a nurse, a caretaker, a planner, or a problem solver. I was just Carol, a woman watching the sunset. The storm wasn't inside me anymore. But I had a feeling a Category 5 hurricane was just about to make landfall in Austin. I gave myself 4 days of perfect, uninterrupted, technology-free peace. It was a detox for the soul. I woke up with the sun, walked for miles on the beach, collecting shells and letting the warm water wash over my ankles. I read my books under the shade of a swaying palm tree, the words on the page a welcome escape. I ate fresh grouper for dinner every night at a little open-air shack by the water. My phone remained off, a dead weight in the bottom of my beach bag. It was a blissful, deliberate ignorance. I was healing breath by breath, wave by wave. I was remembering who Carol was when she wasn't mom. Saturday was the day. The wedding day. I woke up feeling preternaturally calm. There was no anxiety, no dread. I went to my favorite little cafe, got my coffee and a pastry, and walked down to Smathers Beach. The morning sun was gentle and warm. I spread my towel on the soft sand and sat, watching the turquoise water lap at the shore. I thought about them 2,000 miles away in Austin. I pictured the scene with a strange cinematic detachment, the flurry of activity at the hotel, the bridesmaids in their matching silk robes getting their hair and makeup done, the nervous energy of the groomsmen fumbling with their cufflinks. I felt a brief, fleeting pang of sadness for the day that should have been, for the mother of the groom role I was supposed to play. But it passed as quickly as a cloud crossing the sun, replaced by a profound sense of rightness. This was where I was meant to be, here in the sun, alone and free. Around noon, my curiosity finally got the better of me. The ceremony was supposed to start at 4 p.m. The chaos would be well underway by now. It was time. I took a deep breath, pulled the phone from my bag, and pressed the power button. It came to life with a vengeance, vibrating so violently in my hand it felt like it was having a seizure. It was hot to the touch. A tidal wave of notifications flooded the screen, one after another, too fast to even read. The screen showed 93 missed calls, 147 text messages, 22 emails. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the calm rhythm of the waves. I opened my call log. It was a cascading waterfall of panic. Dozens of calls from Michael, dozens from Tiffany, a handful from my daughter Sarah, each one likely a reluctant, guilt-ridden attempt at mediation, and several angry-looking red notifications from my ex-husband Richard. Then I opened my voicemail. My finger trembled slightly as I pressed play on the first unread message. The earliest ones were from Thursday. The first was from the events manager from the venue, Harrison Reed. His voice was polite, professional, and utterly unconcerned. "Hi Carol. Harrison here from Whispering Oaks. Just calling to formally confirm receipt of your cancellation notice. We're very sorry to lose your business and have processed the full refund of your deposit as requested. It should appear in your account within 3 to 5 business days. Hope you'll consider us for future events. Click. Business as usual. The next one was from the florist, also from Thursday. She sounded genuinely confused and worried. Carol? Hi, it's Maria from Pedal Pushers. I got your email. Is everything okay? Is the wedding postponed? Please call me, darling. We have $20,000 of peonies and David Austin roses arriving from Holland tomorrow morning specifically for your event. I scrolled down past a dozen frantic, increasingly unhinged messages from unknown numbers. I guess they were bridesmaids or Tiffany's mother or other vendors. Then I got to the ones from today. From Saturday morning. The day of the implosion. The first was Tiffany. It was almost impossible to understand her through the hysterical, gasping sobs. Carol, we're the caterer, they're not here. The tables are bare. The venue says we don't have a reservation. They booked another wedding. What did you do? You have to fix this. You have to call them and fix this right now. Her voice rose to a shrill, desperate, nails on a chalkboard scream at the end. The next was Richard. There was no sobbing. Just pure venomous rage. You psychotic bitch. You ruined your own son's wedding out of spite. I'm going to sue you for every penny you have. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. This isn't over. I almost laughed. His lawyer. He couldn't even afford to pay his own child support on time, let alone a lawyer. I scrolled through the digital carnage with a strange sense of detachment. It felt like watching a movie, a disaster film where I was the quiet, unseen architect of the beautiful destruction. Then I saw the last voicemail. It was timestamped just 30 minutes ago. It was from Michael. His voice wasn't yelling anymore. It was quiet, defeated, and utterly, completely broken. What he said next sent a chill down my spine, despite the warm Florida sun. Mom, please. I don't know what happened. Tiffany, she's locked herself in the bridal suite and she won't come out. Her parents are screaming at me. They said they're calling their lawyer. They said they're going to ruin my career. That her father will have me blacklisted from every hospital in Texas. What did you do? Mom, you have to tell me what you did. I listened to Michael's message twice. That last part. My career, they're threatening to ruin me. Tiffany's father was a prominent and notoriously vindictive surgeon at the very hospital where Michael had just completed his residency. It wasn't an idle threat. It was a promise. They were threatening to destroy the very future I had sacrificed everything to build for him. They were holding a gun to the head of his dream. And still my first instinct, buried deep beneath the layers of hurt and anger, was a flicker of that old familiar pity. My poor boy caught in the middle. The mother bear in me wanted to rise up, to protect him, to fix it. But then I remembered the coldness of his text. The casual cruelty of the words, please don't make this harder. I remembered the lies he told the family, the way he let them paint me as a monster to save his own skin. The pity died as quickly as it arose, replaced by a hard, cold resolve. He had made his choice. He had chosen his side. He had to lie in the bed he had made. Just then, as if summoned by my thoughts, my phone rang. It was him. For a long moment I just stared at his name on the screen, the gentle waves hissing at the shore in the background. Then I took a slow sip of my now lukewarm coffee, put the cup down deliberately in the sand, took a deep, steadying breath and answered the call. I said nothing. I just waited. I let the silence stretch, forcing him to be the one to speak first. Mom! His voice was tight, frantic. In the background I could hear a woman sobbing hysterically, the sound thin and reedy over the phone. It had to be Tiffany. Mom, you have to tell me what's going on. The venue is gone. The caterer, the flowers, the band, everything. It's all cancelled. The whole wedding is ruined. Yes, I said, my voice eerily calm and even. It was a voice I didn't even recognize as my own. It was a voice free of pleading, free of pain, free of the desperate need for his approval. It was the voice of a woman who had nothing left to lose. I know. There was a stunned silence on his end, so profound I could hear his sharp intake of breath. You know? What do you mean, you know? Did you do this? Did you plan this? You sabotaged our wedding. The accusation came out as a desperate, cracking shout, the last resort of a man who had lost all control. I didn't flinch. I watched a sandpiper skitter along the water's edge. No, Michael, I said, still calm, my voice a quiet counterpoint to his hysteria. I didn't sabotage your wedding. I canceled my business arrangements. What are you talking about? What business arrangements? He sputtered, confused. The venue, Michael. The caterer. The band. All of it. Those were legal contracts I signed. Services I procured using my name and my excellent credit. They were my financial and legal responsibilities. Therefore, they were my arrangements to make, and they were my arrangements to cancel. I let the words hang in the air, each one a small hard stone of truth. He was quiet for a moment, the gears in his mind clearly turning, trying to process this new, unbelievable information. I could hear Tiffany wailing something unintelligible in the background, something that sounded like, "Make her fix it." "But why?" he finally stammered, his voice losing its angry edge and sliding into a bewildered whine. "Why would you do that to us?" "You told me not to come," I said simply. "You sent me a text message and you told me I wasn't invited. You said there was no place for me at the wedding. I chose to believe you. I honored your wishes and I removed myself, and everything legally attached to my name, from the event." "That's not what we meant," he cried, his voice sounding weak and childish. "You know that's not what we meant. You blindsided us. You didn't even give us a chance to fix it." A dry, bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. It was a hollow, humorless sound. "A chance? Michael, I gave you 30 years of chances. I gave you my time, my money, my health, my future. I built the entire foundation of this wedding, piece by piece, with my own 2 hands, and then you told me to get out before the party started. That is not a miscommunication. That is a choice. Your choice." "She didn't mean it like that," he snapped, his voice defensive as he scrambled to protect Tiffany. "You know how Tiffany gets when she's overwhelmed. She was just stressed. She says things she doesn't mean. Of course, the excuse. It was always someone else's fault. Everyone else got a pass, a soft landing, an excuse for their cruelty. Everyone but me. Contracts are contracts, Michael," I said, my voice turning to ice. "And stress isn't a legal defense against breach of contract. Those agreements were in my name. The final payments, the tens of thousands of dollars in financial liability, were on me. What you and Tiffany saw as a wedding was, on paper, a series of business transactions with my signature at the bottom." He was silent. Then he muttered a venomous, resentful hiss. "You sound like a lawyer." I took a deep breath, the salty ocean air filling my lungs, cleansing me. "No, Michael," I said softly, but with all the finality of a judge's gavel. "I sound like a woman who finally learned that her signature is worth more than her silence." And then, before he could say another word, before he could beg or threaten or excuse, I ended the call. I stayed in Key West for 3 more glorious sun-drenched days. I didn't hear from Michael again. The silence was a profound relief, a balm on a wound that had been open for 30 years. But late Tuesday night, as I was packing for my flight home, a single text message appeared on my screen. It was from him. Just 2 words, stark and white against the black screen. "You win." No apology. No remorse. No punctuation. Just blame disguised as surrender. It was his pathetic way of saying, "This is all your fault. You got what you wanted. Are you happy now?" It was the text of a petulant child who had lost a game, not a grown man acknowledging his cruelty. I stared at the message for a long time, not with anger, but with a deep, weary sadness. Winning had never been the goal. I wasn't trying to score points in some sick, twisted family game. I was just trying to stop the bleeding. I held my thumb over the screen and deleted the message, and the entire conversation thread, without replying. When I flew back to Austin, the air felt different. Or maybe I was different. The silence in my house was no longer heavy and suffocating. It was peaceful. It was mine. It was the sound of freedom. I unpacked my bag, putting my sun-drenched clothes into the laundry, the faint scent of salt and coconut a happy reminder of my escape. Then, with a sense of purpose, I walked to my closet and pulled out the sage green dress. It was still pristine in its plastic garment bag, the price tag dangling from the sleeve like a final insult. I looked at it for a moment, not with sadness or regret, but with a sense of clinical detachment. It belonged to a different woman, a woman who no longer lived here. A woman who tried to make herself smaller to make others comfortable. I carefully folded it and placed it in a box for donation, along with the matching shoes and clutch I'd bought. Someone else could make happy memories in them. Someone who was still invited to the beautiful places they helped build. That afternoon I sat at my kitchen table. The same table where I had spent countless hours hunched over spreadsheets and contracts, planning their wedding down to the last-minute detail. But this time, I took out a single sheet of my best cream-colored stationery and my favorite fountain pen. No email. No text. No grand, dramatic speech. Just a note. I thought for a long time about what to say. How do you summarize a lifetime of love and a universe of pain in a few short sentences? How do you say goodbye to a son you still loved, but could no longer have in your life? In the end, I knew I had to be honest, not for them but for me. This was my final word. My closing statement. I wrote, Michael and Tiffany, you uninvited me from the wedding. You were mistaken. I was not a guest. I was the architect. A guest can be turned away at the door. An architect cannot, because without her there is no house. You did not tear me down. You tore down the beautiful thing I built for you. I hope one day you learn that love is not a resource to be used and discarded, but a precious gift to be treasured. I hope you learn that a mother's support is not an entitlement. I will not be a part of your life moving forward. Please understand this is not because of anger. It is because I finally, after all these years, value my own peace more than I value your comfort. I will not set myself on fire to keep you warm any longer. I wish you a life that is as good as the one you believe you deserve. Carol. I didn't sign it, Mom. I was no longer their mother in the way they understood the word. I was Carol. Person. An individual with boundaries and a breaking point. I folded the note cleanly, slipped it into an envelope, and addressed it to Michael's condo. I didn't put a return address. This wasn't the start of a new conversation or a negotiation. It was the end of an old one. I walked it down to the community mailbox at the end of the street and slid it into the outgoing slot. The metallic clank of the lid closing felt like a final satisfying period at the end of a very long, very painful chapter of my life. As I walked back to my quiet house, the afternoon sun warm on my shoulders, I knew there would be no more calls, no more arguments, no more awkward sit-downs to clear the air. My part in their story was over. It was time to start writing my own. Back home, I made myself a tall glass of iced tea and opened all the windows, letting the warm Texas afternoon air drift through the house, chasing out the last of the stale, sad silence. The sun streamed in, making golden, hopeful patterns on the wooden floor. The house didn't feel cold or empty anymore. Felt like a sanctuary. My sanctuary. Later, as evening approached, I took my glass of tea out to the small patio in my backyard, the one I'd always meant to fix up but never had the time for. I sat in a rickety old chair and watched as the sky began to blush with the familiar colors of a Texas sunset, a mirror of the one I'd watched in Key West. It was just as beautiful here. I had just never taken the time to notice. I thought about them, of course. I'm a mother. I don't think that will ever completely go away. I wondered if they were picking through the ruins of their life, if Tiffany's father had followed through on his threats, if Michael's career was in jeopardy. A part of me, the mother part that will never truly die, felt a flicker of concern. But I gently pushed it away. It was not my fire to put out. It was not my mess to clean. I had resigned as their full-time firefighter and janitor. They had wanted me to be invisible, a silent partner in their happiness, a foundation that was felt but never seen. But by removing myself, I had become more visible than ever, most importantly to myself. I had spent my entire adult life building things for other people. A college fund, a career for my son, a down payment for a house, a dream wedding. Now the only thing left to build was my own life. And I had a feeling it was going to be beautiful. The sun warming my face feels different now. Feels earned. Feels like mine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I know I'm not the only one who has ever felt invisible in their own family. For all the parents, siblings, and friends out there who have given and given until there was nothing left, I see you. Have you ever reached a breaking point where you had to choose your own peace over keeping a toxic peace for others? Please, share your experience in the comments below. Your story matters, and reading them helps all of us feel a little less alone. And if my story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like and subscribing for more.